So I've seen sometimes cases of people who move to a country where they speak same language, and it creates this really curious situation where you are the foreigner, you come abroad, and you feel almost instantly you blended in. And you feel that because, well, people understand you and you don't need to change much your behavior. And it seems to be working well. And people joke at your jokes. I mean, they laugh at your jokes. I mean, all is good. And so you convince yourselves that you've adapted very well.
The Auto Ethnographer, your weekly cultural trip around the world. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Auto Ethnographer. I'm really excited that we have a fantastic guest here, Dr. Jerome Dumetz. He's, in my opinion, one of the most respected resources in intercultural management. For decades, he's worked as a cultural advisor, a trainer, a lecturer, a speaker, and a researcher across Europe, Russia, Eastern Europe, as well as parts of Asia. He's been helping professionals and organizations, as well as students, learn and navigate the invisible cultural forces that they're bound to encounter in their professional careers. His work bridges academic insight, but also, actual daily management issues that people would encounter in their professional careers. He's just released a new book, which is going to be one of the main topics that we talk about today. He's published another book separately, jointly with colleagues in the past. And I do have to give in here that Jerome and I have met about 18 years ago in Moscow when he was training me on the mysteries and the enigma of the Russian culture when I was a wide-eyed arrival in the end of 2007. So with that, let's jump right in. Jerome, welcome to the Auto Ethnographer.
Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for this very nice introduction.
No, it definitely comes from the heart, and it's been great to watch what you've been doing and accomplishing in the years since we met. Really, in 2008, it feels like such a long time ago.
It does. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about who is Jerome Dumetz and what got you into this field that you've been in for over a quarter century.
Yes, well, it came a bit naturally, to be honest. So I present myself as a consulting professor, which is a bit of a portmanteau where we mix consulting and lecturing. So for starter, I'm French, all right? So probably noticed by now already quickly. So I've had a bit of an international experience, which also came naturally, 90s, years 2000, really a period where it seemed to be interesting, a little adventurous, but also possible to travel. So a lot of combinations that makes me, after growing up in France, I went to study in the Netherlands, which seems to be a logical thing at that time to study international business because the Dutch, historically, for hundreds of years, have been very trade-orientated. And then I went to do all kind of little activities, and I worked a bit in the US, in San Francisco, and then moved briefly to Canada. Then went back to Europe, and then moved. I go shortly, of course, but I moved to Russia again. I had been a couple of times before to study in particular, and in Russia I changed a bit of not of career, but I got proposed a job in a university. I thought, hey, why not? And so I started to work at the university. And well, when you work in a university, quickly you're being asked, hey, why don't you teach something? So I started to remember the topics that precisely in the Netherlands was. What was very new was cross-cultural management. Two of the most famous authors in this field are Dutch, Hofstede and Trompenaars, with whom I had been in contact during my studies. So I kind of opened my box and started to dig in my books and so on. And so I went on to start my own research of cross-cultural management, but in Russia, which was like a totally new field at that time. And so I went on to do some field research, literally asking people about their experience. What is it to work as a foreigner in Russia, vice versa? And one thing led to another. That in one of those meetings, somebody said, "Oh, but we're having a very nice conversation. You know, you really need to tell that to my colleagues. And why don't we make a training about that?" And I ended up a few weeks later meeting the board of a rather large company, where a bit inexperienced, I did my best to explain what was actually the Russian culture, the French culture. That was the topic. And actually, I got saved by. I mean, I was doing that with my wife because she's also she's a university professor and she's specialized in economic history. So I gathered all the competence I could. And it was very interesting because a lot of trainings about cross-cultural something, it's about the arrival in a country, or sometimes it's about communication. I mean, we did all that, but at the end of the training, actually, we weren't sure that it went well. And it's the spouse of the general manager of the company who literally saved us, because in the feedback, she was like, "Oh, thank you very much. That was exactly what I wanted, because part of the training, I mean, I didn't care about the business part, but you gave a history lesson about the country. And that's what I was expecting." So sometimes you realize that you need to get back to fundamentals. Yeah. And so after that, I continued to do a number of trainings over there, and I started to teach elsewhere. And so since that time, which is like, roughly about 20 years now, I've been having two careers at the same time. One of them is an academic career. So I'm now a Vice Rector for International Affairs in a Czech university. And I also teach in many places. I've been teaching in about 25 universities now. And I write articles when I can. I write books occasionally. I go to conferences. I'll go probably in May somewhere in Austria. So that's one thing I do. And in parallel, I do also trainings, consulting. So it varies. It goes from coaching one-on-one to family training, people moving, team training. I've been traveling a lot across Europe, Eastern Europe in particular. I mean, I'm calling from Prague, which is Central Europe, and but all the Slavic world has been a bit my playground, and and sometimes bigger events. That's the kind of stuff I do, and the combination is useful because I mean. There are only great professors out there, but still, I try to do two things in my consulting job. I try to bring up to date theory, because too often I've noticed that my fellow trainers, they rely on a concept that are totally outdated from the perspective of researchers, namely the cross-cultural models that were introduced in the 80s. When you think of it, it starts getting a little too old. So I try to bring to my students, no, to my clients, a framework that is up to date. And to my students, my consulting enables me to bring some rather current events and examples that are also not too old, because, well, you get all those cliche of companies that failed on that market because they had a wrong name and this kind of stuff, which is not wrong, but sometimes. I mean, a lot of examples, basically, for instance, they predate internet, right? So yes, of course, it was possible at that time to have several brands and this kind of stuff. So I try to bring in examples that are also up to date, right? And well, seems to work a little bit well.
It's interesting. We did have the chance before we started to record to speak a little bit about how we met in Russia about 18 years ago, and how it's changed so dramatically. Because at that moment in time, in the spring of 2008, that was in many ways the peak economic year that the country experienced before starting to have issues related to the global financial crisis. And then, there were other political issues and economic issues that kept it from reaching that same peak. And yet you continued to teach about Russia, the culture, and doing business
Mm,
there for some years on. Um,
yeah.
could you maybe go back a little bit through what you said, how you had to continuously adapt and keep your training material and educational material up to date?
Yeah, because I've been, of course, invited at that time in particular in many places in Europe to talk about Russia as a potential market, to explain it and so on. And I had built a course that was a combination of fundamentals, because I do believe in fundamentals, so a bit of history, a bit of geography, a bit of all those layers that creates the soil that which you can actually understand a
Mhm.
culture, and using all the cross-cultural tools to explain more like the management style, right? And so that, of course, didn't really change fundamentally. I mean, history, geography, management style hasn't changed. What has changed is the consequences and the prospect, actually, that eventually you could bring as a mixed. And so, of course, in 2008, it was all bright, all shiny. It was like the planets were very much aligned into. Well, I mean, one of the first chapters I wrote in a book was a book about the BRICS, and so it was the time where it seems countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China seem to have a lot in common, and would change a lot of things in the way the world would go. Well, it proved
Right.
to be, I mean, the term planets align is a very good one, because the planets align till they don't align anymore, because the dynamism of movement, and that's what happened. So, and Russia went on a different path, I would say. Yeah.
No, it certainly did. Let's talk about some of your, well, challenging cultures, or some of your assignments. I think what I'm curious about is when you coach expat managers across Eastern Europe, or in Asia or Western Europe, which culture or which assignment did you find to be the most challenging to convey to others, and why was that?
I would answer the question a little differently. It's not like one culture is more different than another. I mean, more difficult. It's more like there are two criteria for me that matters. First, very important, is what international experience do you have, right? The so-called cultural competence, which is our capacity to adapt to a different environment, which doesn't require to have an international experience, because you can have different environment back home already. But some people have a high cultural competence due to their experience before, and maybe their personality and knowledge and so on. And other people have a lower cultural experience, competence. So that's the number one, I would say. Even some individuals are being asked to work in an international project or to move abroad, and you really feel like it's like, jumping literally in the ocean. It's never done it before, and never in their life they were thinking about it, didn't get prepared for it, and literally discover every little details that are different, starting with, well, not everybody speaks English, or not everybody speaks whatever they speak, and so on. So that's the one element. And the second element would be the cultural gap, like how far culturally the two cultures are about. So someone coming from Asia coming to Europe will have to adjust on many things, but the same could be true from someone from the US that comes to Europe. Just to use that example,
Mhm.
and the combination of those two things makes it that basically it's how much do we think we know something, right? And that's an extra dimension, because some people think they know a lot, and they realize that they know cliches, stereotypes, or they miss out. So yeah. So I can't really say. I mean, I've heard actually pretty disturbing cases of people. I mean, within the expat world, all right? Like, so people working. I'm not talking about going on holidays or going on pension
Mhm.
somewhere. I mean, that's let's keep on business approach, all right? But cases of people moving to a culture where the cultural gap is very narrow, for instance, and that can be an extra trick because there are plenty of examples around the world like that. I mean, Canada versus US, Germany, Austria, that was a good one, or the French with the Belgium, or the Dutch with the Belgium. And, you got all those. I mean, before the war, it was Ukraine and Russia. So countries where usually individuals, they connect on one very important element of culture, which is language. So you go to a country where you understand what people say. Let's put it this way, all right? You understand what people say. It doesn't need to be exactly your language, but you understand more or less. Maybe they got a funny accent or whatever. And when you are in a position of management, which is very important, of course, when you're in a position of management, sometimes you don't get to see the cultural differences the way someone else would, because, well, the hierarchy influences the situation. I mean, basically, you are the elephant in the room full of mice, like it's famously known, and all the mice they walk around, and you don't realize that actually your immediate environment is actually changing, right? So sometimes people in very top management who are expats, it takes them a longer time to realize that they live abroad because, well, they come to the office, everybody speaks the same language, not only a question of language, but of jargon and so on. They use the same computer system. I mean, sometimes the offices looks the same because you import furniture and so on. I mean, you can see all kind of crazy stuff. So I've seen sometimes cases of people who move to a country where they speak same language. And it creates this really curious situation where you are the foreigner, you come abroad, and you feel almost instantly you blended in. And you feel that because, well, people understand you and you don't need to change much your behavior, and it seems to be working well. And people joke at your jokes. I mean, they laugh at your jokes. All is good. And so you convince yourselves that you've adapted very well, or more generally, you tell everybody around, no, but there's no difference. It's the same, right? Oh, so you live in this country. How is it? Well, it's exactly the same at home. Right. And of course, that's an illusion because you live in some sort of a theater where everybody around is just making you comfortable, and they all do their utmost to adapt to you. But one day, out of the blue, you say something, you make a remark, you ask for something, and then you got a sudden, like pushback. People, and typically it's here something like, oh, but no, sorry, we don't do that here. And that's enough to get like this sort of reality check. But you're not at home, and you're a guest here, and all that time that you thought you blended in reality, no, you've had a flashlight on over your head. Everybody knows you're a foreigner because, well, look at you, how you speak, how you behave, and so on. It's just we've been polite enough not to bother you with that, but don't think you've blended in, and that creates sometimes greater culture shocks than going to a very different culture where people, they look different, they dress different, they eat different, and you're like, all right, don't try to pretend. I mean, you're just, you just don't fit very well. So let's work on it. So
that's fascinating. I never really thought about that. That the smaller gap almost has a bigger potential to trip you up because it's not obvious. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, you forget about it.
Do you have any example of something that you could share that you've come across during your time, advising in these corporations?
Among the classics, I mean, what I'm going to say, it's not exactly a breakthrough, but for instance, between French language in France and French Canadian, you have a lot of what we call in linguistics false cognates, which are it's not false friends. It's like words that are exactly the same, but they don't mean the same, right? And well, usually it's misunderstanding. It's usually below the belt. So misunderstanding, like you say a word, it means something else, and everybody's laughing. So I all the examples I've got in mind are improper for a podcast, but usually it has some funny sexual connotation because you say something, it means something else, right? That's what people remember.
We are a family podcast here. I have to say, I experienced very much the same when I was working for Volvo and leading the Americas, mostly Central America, South America. And when you bring together all the different Spanish-speaking countries, you find out very quickly that you have those, you called it false cognates, where you have the same exact words. And they brought fits of laughter from everybody because somebody would ask for something quite innocently, and it had a occasionally very dirty meaning in the other.
I don't know why, but that's the only one we remember. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but being embarrassed in Spanish is not the same as being embarazada. You see, so that's one of them, for instance. And what example precisely? Well, it's in the book. That's why I remember it. It's between French and German, and there is this young. Intern, a young girl who works in a German company on an internship, and she's doing all very well. She speaks German, all goes well, and for her project, she goes to see her boss. I mean, the boss of the company, and who's in his probably mid-50s, and she's probably in her 20s, and so she comes to his office and she asks for a rendezvous, which he's like, well, maybe after work or something. And of course she didn't get it, because for her a rendezvous means just a meeting, where for him in German it's more like a romantic meeting, right? So they quickly understood that there was a misunderstanding, and that it went on well. But that's an example, for instance. Yeah.
I love those examples, and we're going to get to your book in a few moments, because you have 199 such examples to talk about.
More of them, but yeah.
You brought up something else that's really interesting about your two tracks of your career, where number one, you're coaching on the executive side, but at the same time, you're also parallel for many years. You've been teaching, and I think you mentioned like 25 different universities that you've taught at in a number of different countries. What's the challenge between, or the difference between coaching the executives and teaching at the university level? I mean, which audience do you find more challenging, and which one do you possibly enjoy more? And if you can't answer because you're going to spoil your business, too bad. You can answer anyway.
No, I think I can answer. Actually, the best option would be the best of both worlds, which are MBA students. Because MBA students, in principle, you're having grown-up students, and they have work experience. So they understand, they walk on both feet, right? It's different challenges. I can't really say which one I prefer. They have different, I'm stereotyping here, but I would say on the business consulting aspect, still often participants want some sort of practical quick fixes, all right? Like, tell me exactly how I'm going to deal with, I've got a problem with my employees, how to talk to them. And I must admit, I mean, I can bring only some general tendencies, like, well, people you're working for, generally they work like that, but it doesn't mean your particular employee will be like this, So that's one of the limits sometimes, to want a little bit too much of a go-through guide. For the students, well, it depends a bit what what specialties they've got. I come to like very much engineers because they tend to accept that there are things out there that they still can learn, right? So
Hmm.
I find them a little bit more open to new concepts, and cross-cultural management works very well for engineers, right? Because it's really it's usually the engineering curriculum misses out a lot of elements such as communication and management, which is really bad because many people with an engineering background, they're going to end up in a managerial position, and so I can see that my course brings, because it's really a course of management. I mean, I always insist on that. You know, cross-cultural studies can be leaning towards mostly communication and linguistics. That's usually my colleagues who are language teachers who teach that way. I do that, but for me, it's just one lecture, and I mostly teach management. So it's really like
Hmm.
a course of modern management, which is influenced by culture. So yeah. Engineers, like people with an engineering mind, usually are very open to that. So they miss that out of it.
So, in follow up to that, is there
Mm.
anything in particular that students maybe misunderstand more than executives, or vice versa? Is there something in general that executives miss that students might catch as a function of perhaps age or stage of career?
Well, yes, having a bit of experience, usually you are able to relate what I'm talking about. So the one of my goals when I'm teaching, all right, so I'm on the teaching side, is that students are able, while I explain the concept, to figure out potential situations that they will be able to get out, where, like find a solution or come up with an innovative approach. In consulting, usually we're more into I don't know explaining past experiences. Like there is this sort of oh, now I understand moment. It's like
Hmm.
oh, that really
Right.
reminds me of oh, what you're describing is exactly what I heard last week. This kind of stuff. So it's kind of vindicates me. It's like all right, so I got my theory right. The theory is based on fact, of course, but it's always pleasant when after explaining a concept and so on, someone comes to me and say, "Oh, but you know what you've explained. I mean, this is exactly that's my daily life, right? This kind of stuff. That feels good, yeah."
Oh, that's fantastic. Is there an overlap in your approaches between the teaching at the university and the coaching,
Yes,
or do
very
you
much.
really see those as a distinct
No,
two
no, no.
separate different approaches?
No, no, big overlap. It's more, of course. One will be more practical orientated, like based on the experience. The other ones will be a little bit more theoretical because, well,
Hmm.
when you're sitting in a classroom, you need to have a bit of theory. Right? But
Right.
but you'd be surprised. A lot of professionals are interested in the theory actually on their own, and very often at the end of my sessions, training sessions, I'm being asked to send a reading list and so on because many managers want to keep on training themselves, and it's always feels good to learn something new, and
No,
plenty
I
of
love it. I
interesting
love to learn
resources.
new
Yeah.
things. And I have to admit that my learning preference is actually to understand the theoretical framework, and
Mhm.
then you pack on the more practical, pragmatic things onto that framework and figure out how it all fits and comes together.
Yeah, both works. It's also nice to start with the practical and try to figure out the theory. It's a matter
Yeah.
of preferences.
That concludes part one of my conversation with Jerome Dumetz, renowned cross cultural management expert and author. Next week, we'll pick up on the conversation where we left off and dive right into Jerome's book, 199 Cross Cultural Case Studies, Short Stories of Real Cultural Misunderstandings from Around the World and Their Analysis. We'll also explore the topic of AI and whether that technology will have an impact on cross cultural management. He'll also give us some advice for people who are going out and interacting with a different culture for the first time. See you next week, and keep on driving. Thank you for joining us on today's journey. Please remember to like and subscribe to the Auto Ethnographer and leave us a rating or comment. For more information, visit our website at auto-ethnographer.com. You can also follow on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.